Bonjour à tous and welcome to this video on le participe présent, the present participle, more commonly known in English as the ing form of a verb. This is something that we use all the time in English, and while it's not quite so common in French, it's still very useful to know. So of course in this video we'll go through some of its uses. First of all though, I want to talk to you about how to form the present participle, simply because this is the easy bit, particularly if you're already familiar with the imperfect tense. And I'd say you probably should be. The imperfect is far more important than the present participle, so if you haven't done the imperfect already, I highly recommend that you learn that first. And once you're familiar with that, forming the present participle will be very, very simple, because the first two steps are exactly the same. So we start by taking the new form of the verb in the present tense, remove the ONS just as we do the imperfect, but then instead of adding a whole host of endings depending on the person, we just add ANT. The present participle only has one form. So let's take a regular ER verb, jouer, meaning to play, and apply these rules. So the new form of jouer in the present tense is jouant. Remove the ONS, that gives us the stem joue, add ANT, and we get jouant. We can do the same with a regular IR verb, finir, meaning to finish. Nous, in the present tense, finissons. Remove the ONS, that is finisse, add ANT, finissant. Then attendre, meaning to wait. The new form in the present tense, attendons. Remove the ONS, that gives us attend, and then add ANT, attendant. And the beauty with this method is that it works even for most irregular verbs. So for example, if we take faire, meaning to do or to make, usually that's very, very irregular, but with this method we will get the right answer. So if we take the new form of faire in the present tense, that's faisons, remove the ONS, that gives us fais, add ANT, you get faisant, which is indeed the present participle of faire. And in fact, there are only three irregular present participles. The first one is similar to the case that we had with the imperfect. With être, the new form of the present tense is sommes, so there's no ONS to remove, and so we just have to remember that the present participle of être is étant. Then, for whatever reason, savoir becomes sachant, and avoir becomes ayant. Don't ask me why, just remember that those three are irregular. All the others, including irregular verbs, work with that method that we just learnt. So now the question is, when do we use it? Or rather, when do we not use it? As I said before, in English we use the present participle an awful lot, and it's important to know when we use it in English and when we don't use it in French. So, for example, in English we can say, I am playing golf. This is a typical example of the present continuous tense, i.e. the action is happening right now. In French, though, the only tense that we can use to express an action which is happening right now is the present, and so to translate this, we would simply say je joue au golf. Of course, this does also mean I play golf, but as far as French is concerned, I am playing golf and I play golf are exactly the same. If we really wanted to specify that I'm playing golf right now, you could be really simple and say je joue au golf maintenant, I play golf now. Or if you really, really wanted to, you could say je suis en train de jouer au golf, but that's more like I'm in the process of playing golf. It's a little bit redundant. Normally, to say I am playing golf, you just say je joue au golf. Then we have sentences such as I like playing golf. In this case, the verb is like, and playing is more of a noun here. It's the act of playing golf. In French, though, we just use the infinitive and say j'aime jouer au golf. Literally, I like to play golf. In English, we have the choice. We can say I like playing or I like to play. In French, all we can do is say j'aime jouer au golf. Similarly, we can say in English, playing golf is fun. Again, playing here is not a verb, it's a noun. In French, we would use a verb, and again, in the infinitive form, we'd say jouer au golf est amusant. Literally, to play golf is fun. And then finally, in English, we can say things like she saw him eating, where we have two verbs, saw and eating, and the second one is the present participle. In French, a good rule of thumb is if we have two verbs in a sentence, the second one is infinitive, and so in this case we would say elle l'a vu manger. Literally, she saw him to eat. So now you're probably wondering, well, when can we use it? You've told us all these instances where we can't use the present participle. Can we use it at all? And the answer is yes. Now, admittedly, the present participle isn't that common in spoken French, but you're most likely to hear it used in the by or while doing something structure, commonly known in French as le gérondif. This is very, very simple. All we do is take the word en and then put the present participle after it, and we get by or while doing something. For example, il s'est cassé le nez en jouant au rugby. Il s'est cassé le nez en jouant au rugby. He broke his nose while playing rugby. Or we could say, tu deviendras intelligent en lisant ces livres. Tu deviendras intelligent en lisant ces livres. You will become intelligent by reading these books. And finally, elle regarde la télé en faisant ses devoirs. Elle regarde la télé en faisant ses devoirs. She watches the TV while doing her homework. Now at this point, a lot of people say, well, how do I know whether we're saying by or while? And the magic word, as is often the case, is context. Often it's very, very clear. For example, in the last sentence, you wouldn't really say she watches the TV by doing her homework. That's just a little bit weird. So you naturally go for while. With the other two, you could argue either way. You could say he broke his nose while playing rugby, or he broke his nose by playing rugby. Similarly, you will become intelligent by reading these books. You will become intelligent while reading these books. Admittedly, there are subtle, very, very subtle differences. As far as French is concerned, they're negligible. Don't worry about them. Trust me, context will make it clear. Remember that we don't speak in isolated sentences like these, and often you will just know. Okay, one of them will be clear to you, and 9 times out of 10, you won't have to worry about it. Now, as I said, this structure is very common in the spoken language, and it always makes me think of Les Tutos, which is an incredibly popular internet series, which sadly is not around anymore, but all the episodes are available online, and I highly recommend that you watch them. And at the start of every episode, we hear something along the lines of,
Salut bande de salopes! Avec les tutos, on apprend en s'amusant! Et aujourd'hui, on va faire un œuf mayonnaise!
Now, that might have seemed all weird and strange, and it is. That's the point. Trust me, you just have to go and watch it. It is brilliant. But the bit that we're interested in is what he says just after the very first line, which I'm not going to translate. He says, avec les tutos, on apprend en s'amusant. So, avec les tutos, with the tuto, this is short for tutorials, on apprend, we learn, en s'amusant. So, s'amuser is to have fun, en s'amusant is while having fun. So, with the tutorials, we learn while having fun. Of course, you could argue it's we learn by having fun, but again, really, what is the difference? Either way, I think this is a really nice example of the present participle in action, and as I said before, is probably where you'll hear it most. However, it is also used a lot in the written language, often to talk about simultaneous actions. Now, of course, doing something while you're doing something else is two simultaneous actions, but we can use the present participle to talk about simultaneous actions that aren't necessarily related and are simply giving us more information about something. So, for example, we could say, Marc, mangeant une pomme, est allé au travail. Marc, mangeant une pomme, est allé au travail. Marc, eating an apple, went to work. So the important thing here is the fact that Marc went to work. That's why the mangeant une pomme is between commas. The mangeant une pomme is just extra information about what he was doing while he was going to work. Okay, they're not remotely related. Now, that doesn't mean the actions can't be related. We could say something, for example, such as, sachant que c'était dangereux, je n'ai pas monté la montagne. Sachant que c'était dangereux, je n'ai pas monté la montagne. Knowing that it was dangerous, I didn't climb the mountain. Notice in English we're using a present participle as well. And although the fact that I didn't climb the mountain is a result of my knowing that it was dangerous, again, all we're doing is adding more information. Okay, I could just say, je n'ai pas monté la montagne. I didn't climb the mountain. But I'm just saying, knowing that it was dangerous, I didn't climb the mountain. It's extra information about what I was doing while I was doing something else, or in this case, what I was doing while I wasn't doing something else. Similarly, we could say, et enfin, j'ai acheté 2 sandwiches. Et enfin, j'ai acheté 2 sandwiches. Being hungry, literally having hunger, I bought 2 sandwiches. Again, the important information here is the fact that I bought 2 sandwiches. All I'm doing is telling you a little bit more by saying, I was hungry, and that was why. And indeed, if we were to say these, you'd probably just use a because, right? Because we're giving a reason. Je n'ai pas monté la montagne parce que je savais que c'était dangereux. I didn't climb the mountain because I knew that it was dangerous, and in that case we don't use a present participle. We just use whichever tense is appropriate, in this case the imperfect. Okay, similarly, j'ai acheté 2 sandwiches parce que j'avais faim. I bought 2 sandwiches because I was hungry. Okay, again, it's extra information. You could just say I bought 2 sandwiches, I didn't climb the mountain, but you add a little bit more by including a because. That's much more common in the spoken language, but in the written language you'll see things a little bit more like this. Also, we can use this to replace qui. Specifically, we're replacing relative clauses. I say to replace qui, that doesn't really explain much, but some people aren't so happy with the terminology. But you'll see what I mean in a moment anyway. I don't mean replacing qui when we're asking a question, for example, but that should become clear in a moment. For example, you might read Les enfants jouant au parc, the children playing in the park. This is exactly the same as Les enfants qui jouent au parc. Okay, the children who are playing in the park. We just use the present participle in writing to avoid repetition of qui. In speaking, we have a tendency to repeat qui an awful lot. And so in writing, because they like concision and not so much repetition, to use the present participle is a little bit more appropriate. Similarly, we can say things like les personnes croyant en Dieu, the people believing in God, and that's the same as les personnes qui croient en Dieu, which is much more common in the spoken language. Now, both of these you will see a lot, particularly, as I've said, in writing, but in journalism. And so I thought it would be a good idea to read some extracts from a newspaper article in order to see how it's used. So, the article that we'll be looking at is this one from La Dépêche. Now, La Dépêche is a publication local to Toulouse, but this article was written by Agence France Presse, which is the central French press agency, so it will appear on other websites as well. It just so happens that it took it from La Dépêche. And let's have a look at the headline here. There isn't actually any present participle in the headline, but I think it's worth having an idea of what's going on in the article itself. So we have La Corée du Nord installe des missiles sur sa côte est et attise le feu. So La Corée du Nord is North Korea. Installe des missiles installs missiles sur sa côte est on its eastern coast et attise le feu. Attiser le feu is an idiomatic expression. It literally means to poke or to fuel the fire. So what they're doing is making a bad situation worse. Okay, so this is a story from 2013. Of course, it's a little bit out of date now, but it has a lot of present participles in it, so we're going to read it anyway. So we begin with the following extract. La Corée du Nord a transporté un second missile de moyenne portée sur sa côte orientale et l'a hissé sur un lance-missile mobile, selon l'agence sud-coréenne Yonhap, alimentant les craintes d'un tir imminent qui aggraverait une situation déjà explosive. So that's quite a long sentence, I know. Really, the details aren't that important, but again, just to give you an idea of what's going on. According to the South Korean agency Yonhap, North Korea has transported a second mid-range missile to its eastern coast and has mounted it on a mobile missile launcher, alimentant les craintes, feeding the fears of an imminent launch which could aggravate an already explosive situation. So this is something that we could quite easily read in English as well. Okay, feeding the fears of an imminent launch. It translates almost literally. And what we're doing here was just giving more information. Okay, so North Korea has done this, and yes, there's a relationship. The cause of the feeding of the fears is the movement of the missiles. But it's just extra information, okay? North Korea has done this, thus feeding the fears of an imminent launch. Alimenter means to feed both literally and figuratively, and of course, as I said before, les craintes are the fears. So hopefully this doesn't seem too foreign to you, because in English we'd use a present participle as well, and this is very, very common. Okay, one thing happens, and this happens almost as a result. So let's move on to the next extract. La Maison-Blanche a fait savoir jeudi que les États-Unis prenaient toutes les précautions nécessaires, tout en assurant ne pas être étonnés par le comportement de Pyongyang. Il y a des éléments familiers dans les déclarations du régime nord-coréen, a noté le porte-parole du président Barack Obama, Jay Carney. Again, another long sentence. So, la Maison Blanche, of course, is the White House, made it known on Thursday that the United States were taking all necessary precautions, all while assuring that it wasn't surprised by the behavior in Pyongyang. There are some familiar elements in the declarations of the North Korean regime, noted the spokesperson for President Barack Obama, Jay Carney. So this tout temps plus present participle is very, very common in French, both spoken and written. And in this case, it's being used simply to highlight the fact that the two things are going on at the same time. Again, it's a little bit of extra information. And also, the way it reads to me is the writer is kind of trying to reassure us a little bit. The United States are taking all these necessary precautions, but at the same time, they're saying, we're not surprised, it's okay, this is all very familiar to us. So it's almost like saying, yes, North Korea has done this, but don't worry, we're not too worried about it. You can also use tout temps plus present participle to really highlight how remarkable the fact that two actions are going on at the same time is. For example, we might say, elle travaille à temps complet tout en élevant ses enfants. Elle travaille à temps complet tout en élevant ses enfants. So she works full-time all while bringing up her children. Again, I'd say the translation is pretty much the same in English. And what it's there to do is to say, look, she's working full-time and she's looking after her children. How remarkable is that? It's really to highlight how extraordinary something like that is. In the example from the article, though, that's not what we were seeing. Like I said before, it's there very much to emphasize these two things are happening at exactly the same time. Not at the same era, not in the same year, but at exactly the same time. Our next extract is the following. Les États-Unis feraient mieux de réfléchir à la grave situation actuelle, ajoutait-elle, jugeant que les vols de bombardiers B-52 et B-2 américains au-dessus de la Corée du Sud, à l'occasion de manœuvres communes américano-sud-coréennes, étaient à l'origine de l'aggravation de la crise. Again, another really long sentence. The French do really like these long sentences. So what do we have? The United States would be best to really think about the serious situation at the moment. She added, I can't remember who the elle refers to here. I have a feeling it's more of an institution than a person, but again, that's not important. Judging that the flights of B-52 and B-2 bombers above South Korea during common maneuvers between the Americans and the South Koreans were at the origin or were the cause of the aggravation of the crisis. So again, this jugeant que translates quite nicely to judging that, and again, it's saying one thing and doing something else at the same time. So the United States would be better to do this, and at the same time, in saying that, this person or this institution is judging that the B-52 and B-2 bombers flying over South Korea while the Americans and South Koreans are doing things together, they're the problem, they're what's causing the aggravation. Okay, so again, it works quite nicely in English as well, and hopefully this doesn't feel too alien to you. As I've said many times, this is used an awful lot in journalism. This isn't just the only example that we'll see. And to use this in speech, you know, it's not wrong, it's just not particularly natural. Okay, and I don't think it's that natural in English either. There'd be another way of expressing it if you were saying something similar in English. And then finally, we have Séoul est prête à évacuer ses ressortissants pour leur propre sécurité, si la situation le requiert, a déclaré vendredi le ministre de l'Unification, RESEAUX Kil-jae, précisant que ce n'était pas le cas pour le moment. So Seoul is ready to evacuate its nationals, its inhabitants, for their own security if the situation requires it, declared on Friday the Minister of Unification, RESEAUX Kil-jae, clarifying that it wasn't the case for the moment. So again, we're saying one thing and then saying another thing at the same time. Again, this one seems to me like the writer is trying to assure us. Okay, so Seoul is ready to evacuate everyone if necessary, but at the same time he's saying it's not the case for the moment. We don't need to evacuate. Don't panic. But the important thing here, as I've said, outside of the context, is that he's saying this and at the same time clarifying this. Again, works perfectly well in English as well, so hopefully that doesn't require too much explanation. That said, if anything does require any more explanation, then don't hesitate to ask. I know this has been a long video, we've gone through an awful lot, so if there's anything you need to ask about, do. And that's about it, really. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. Hopefully you've seen plenty of examples that will help you understand all the things that we've been through. And of course, until next time, à bientôt.